Greetings, traveler. I'm SnapJelly, and a couple of days ago, when I was taking a shower at 3 a.m., somebody in my house knocked on the door asking if I could take a sword downstairs because she was hearing some rumblies and she was scared. Turns out it was the cat who was freaking out for no reason. But it did give me an idea for a video. Swords for home defense. Which sword would be the best? Because I initially just walked downstairs and she was like, no, take a sword with you, you got swords. Like, yeah, I did not take a sword with me downstairs. Personally, if I'm gonna be very honest, I don't think swords are the best choice for home defense. And if I would pick something in this room to defend my home with, it would not be a sword. Just so we're on the same page here, for the sake of this video, I'm gonna assume that you don't want to kill the person who is intruding in your house. Now, in some countries that's legal. But I'm not talking about that here. Just so that we're on the same page, the thing that I'm going for here, the thing that I'm really arguing is your safety, essentially. Like somebody breaks into your house, you want to defend your family, your stuff, whatever. So you want that person to go away and for you to be safe and for you to defend yourself if necessary, with physical violence. But I'm not going to assume that you just want to chop his head off, because if you do, then, well, that's the end of it. Grab any kind of sword, go swoosh, chop his head off, and there you go. I, however, would say that I don't think it's the best choice in general to take a sharp sword with you to defend your house. Because it also depends very much on your house, of course, on how much space there is in your house. But if you grab a sharp sword, regardless of if it's big or small, things can get very messy. And if your opponent essentially decides to tackle you and it turns into sort of a wrestling match, then I really don't want a sharp bar close to my own body. So I would not pick a sharp sword, because most burglars are not going to be wearing helmets or whatever, and if you smack somebody with a dull sword right in the head, that's gonna hurt a lot. He might not die instantly, because if you do it with a sharp sword, you just chop the top of his head off, but it will incapacitate him surely. So you can even crack a skull with that. So a dull sword, in my opinion, would be better than a sharp sword. But even so, I don't think a sword is the best choice to begin with, because I took something downstairs for safety, for protection. I took this. This is what I took. This, in my opinion, a very short mace, as you can see, is a way better tool for home defense than any of the swords on this wall. Why? Well, because if I would pick a sword, let's pick this one. I haven't picked it in a while. This sword, well, here I'm already hitting the ceiling. So if I want to swing the sword at my opponent and get a proper swing in, I'm scraping the ceiling. I can't do that, so I can only go like taps like this, which, you know, if you get that on your arm, it would suck. If you get it on your head, it would suck. But basically, if I would swing at my opponent with a sort of like a wrist flick kind of motion like this, it would not really hurt him that much. It would, you know, leave a mark and that's it. And if I go for his face, he could cover with his arms, protect himself essentially, and well, I'm pretty much screwed if he has a knife or whatever. Now, this on the other hand is very small, and I can actually lift my arm all the way and still not hit the ceiling. Now I'm hitting the ceiling, if I step on my tippy toes. So with this, I can swing full power, full force, do a lot of damage, and even if I don't go for lethal damage, if my opponent blocks himself with his arms or whatever, if I give a full force smack like this on his arm, I'll break that shit. So it would effectively be a lot more dangerous in confined spaces, and that's really a thing that you need to think about. Weapons are a great advantage in any kind of fight if you have the space to use them. Because if you're like stuck in a door frame or in a hallway or whatever and you have a sword of any kind, you're pretty much limited to thrusts, which are incredibly deadly, but you can swing your sword. You can swing this. Also, I would argue that a mace or like even just a simple baseball bat, it doesn't have to be a medieval weapon per se, a blunt impact weapon has a lot more stopping power than a sword has. So just talking about safety, let's say the burglar draws a knife on you or whatever, and he decides to rush you, then you need something to be able to stop him. You might be able to stab him, but he would still continue going. There's no way of saying that he would immediately stop. So something that's heavier and bulkier would have a bit more stopping power, and I think that would make it a bit safer for you. Still not very safe, it's still incredibly dangerous, and you should avoid that if possible. Also, I'd say that you really don't want to be, especially because you have a weapon, you kind of don't want to be in a confined space. You want to go to an open space if possible, to the most open space that's available to you, so that you can use the weapon. Otherwise, there's really no point to it. There's another YouTuber, whom shall remain unnamed, but it's Scaligrim, who has made a video about this in the past, and he, I believe, said that it's possible to lodge a huge shield in a door frame and stab around that with a short sword. I'm gonna have to respectfully disagree. I mean, you could, but I don't think that's a good idea. The idea that you could lodge a shield in a door frame and kind of just be safe behind that sounds very MC Dojo to me. It's very naive to think that the burglar, if he would attack you, would not be able to harm you because of that. I personally think it would be more dangerous for you because you lose mobility because you're leaning against that shield. Essentially, somebody could charge in and kick the shield and kick you over or something like that. And you might be able to stab around that and hit him in the leg, but then you're still flat on your ass. And if you fall down and hit your head against the wall or whatever, you're unconscious. So I really don't think it's a good idea to use a big shield. Small shield though. This could actually help quite a lot. Because if the burglar has a baseball bat or whatever and swings at you, this will keep you safe. Simple as that. Now, size of the buckler also matters a lot, because this one is quite big, it's also quite thick, it's relatively heavy, it's a bit heavier than I'd actually want a buckler to be, so it can take heavier blows, I guess, but it's not great for punching, because a buckler is of course harder than your knuckles, and you could technically punch with it, but a buckler this heavy, I feel more comfortable with when I'm just talking about doing damage to my assaultant, opponent, whatever you would call it. Essentially, I'd be more comfortable with this buckler if I do like a hammer fist motion. This is, I can exert more power this way than I could this way, which still not a bad thing. I could hit people this way, and essentially a buckler would, provide some protection for things like baseball bats. So something like a buckler could work. A helmet as well to protect your head, but many helmets are also very limiting in vision, so you got to keep that in mind. Also, I think it should be noted that I wouldn't grab two things. Like, I'd say that a buckler or a mace, short mace, would be good weapons for home defense. I wouldn't use both of them. I would want one arm free, no matter what. Because in both scenarios where I could use either of these in close combat, essentially, that's grappling distance. Alright, this thing's very short, that's grappling distance as well. I don't know if my opponent wants to grapple, wants to rush in, maybe he wants to keep distance, but if so, I want to have one arm free. Always, regardless of which one I'm using, I would want to be able to smack the shit out of my opponent but have one arm free. I can always drop this if I need to. So either one of those I think is a good option. Now another thing that I think is a good option is something different. It's just this. Pocket knife. Actually. Pretty much with this, I mean, knife fighting is incredibly dangerous. There's a lot of ideas of knife fighting out there, but actual knife fighting, it's brutal, it's horrible. But something that a knife does do is it's compact, it's small, you can pretty much use it everywhere, no matter how small and confined the place that you are is. And it's scary for your opponent, right? Something like this might also, because that's also a thing, right? Again, counting the idea that you struggling might just cause the burglar to fuck off. That's a win in my book. I gotta say, like, if you're there with a knife causing the person who is like trying to rob you just to fuck off, I think that's a good day. It could have gone a lot worse, right? So preventing combat is better in my mind. If you have something like this, if it does come to somebody attacking you, you can always use this no matter how close he is. You can use this in very confined space. You can use this when you're taking a shit, right? If somebody breaks into your house while you're on the toilet, you got your pants down, if you have a pocket knife, you can use it right there and it's incredibly effective. It doesn't have to be a pocket knife, it could be any knife, it could be a dagger, but essentially, oops. Stay. could be a dagger, but personally I think I'd rather have the pocket knife. I'd rather have something smaller because this bit of reach really doesn't give me any advantages here. And I want, with a sharp weapon in confined spaces, I really want it to be as small as possible. Because the longer that it becomes, the easier it becomes to just scrape on things. So the smaller one, actually, in my mind, is better in this scenario than a bigger dagger. Quite on the contrary, something else that possibly, I'm not 100% certain about this if it would really be a benefit, but something that might help you is actually something else. This, a fencing mask. Pretty much, fencing masks, they provide protection for your head, but they don't really limit your vision as much as most helmets do. There's also open-faced helmets, of course, but this pretty much protects your entire face, which is incredibly important, and you can see all around because, well, it kind of, if you've never worn a fencing mask before, it limits your vision a little bit because this is like a wire, but you can see through it. You can see all around. It also limits your breathing a little bit, technically, but not as much as a helmet would. And this protects your face against punches, against whatever it might. It could block a stab. I think if your opponent stabs at your face, you could wear your entire fencing gear. I wouldn't wear any gloves because it would be protection. But I'm kind of indifferent about this on the fence about it. If it provides some protection, it could help. Fencing masks, they are not really limiting, at least if you get used to wearing one. In the beginning they are very annoying, but if you get used to wearing one, they're not really limiting in mobility or breathing or anything. So this could help you out quite a lot. If you get a very hard smack from a baseball bat on the fencing mask, it's a lot better than if you would get that smack on the forehead. Now another thing that you could use, now I'm thinking about it, is something like this, a dumbbell. If you can hit your opponent with this, you'll probably kill him. But on the other hand, I would say this would not be a very effective weapon because you can't fucking swing it. You can maybe toss it in his direction, toss it down the stairs when he's coming upstairs, and if you hit him, you'll kill him. But on the other hand, something else that might be a way better weapon for self-defense is this, a dumbbell. Again, but a small one. This one is very dusty. It's 1.5 kilos, or 3.3 pounds. So it's the weight of a sword, actually. This is obviously a lot lighter, but it's still very hard. It's way harder than your fist would be. It's light enough that you can swing it freely. You can punch with it or hammer fist with it. And essentially, if you smack this into somebody's face, you'll do a lot of damage. You can crack some things that people don't want to have cracked. Doesn't look very intimidating. So you might get them by surprise because they're having a laughing attack. That should be factored in. There should be like an intimidation factor of your opponent running away. I don't think they're going to be very intimidated if you show up with a sword. They're probably just going to laugh. Most people don't take it that seriously. They go like, ha, nerd with a sword. They're not going to be intimidated with a little pink dumbbell either. But what am I talking about? Anyway, I think you'd want something small, something very small. I would personally go for something that it gives off blunt trauma, like a very short mace, or a tiny little pink dumbbell, which you can swing freely, something that's harder than your fist so you can punch with it. I wouldn't pick anything sharp, if possible, because if things go wrong, I don't want that sharp thing near me. If we start wrestling and there's like a dumbbell or a mace in the way, that does nothing, right? But if there's a knife here, I'm not going to be that happy. But if I would pick a knife or a sharp object, I would pick one that's very, very small. So something like a pocket knife or a kitchen knife, if you can get your hands on one. It's better than nothing. And a buckler. I think a buckler is a good tool for home defense. A fencing mask might be a good tool for home defense. And that's about it, I think, for this video. I wouldn't pick anything else. I wouldn't pick a sword. I wouldn't pick a long sword, definitely not. Maybe if they attack you while you're in your backyard cleaning your swords, then I would pick a long sword. Otherwise, I wouldn't. So, if you stuck around this long, you might as well subscribe. Also follow me on social media. Links are in the description below. And thank you for joining my quest, and I hope you'll join me in the next one.